Long before they paved paradise and put up a parking lot, Delaware and Hudson Railroad was considered the international highway between Montreal and New York. Passengers relaxed in the comfort of through Pullman cars from Windsor to Grand Central Station.
The technology of railroad didn't become feasible until the 1840s and early 1850s.
At Moore's Junction, they connected with the Grand Trunk Railway, and that got them into Hemingford, Quebec. And then from Hemingford, they managed to go north from there to St. Isidore Junction and several other Canadian connections, and finally into Lachine and into Montreal. And that, for many years, was the way that the D&H got into Montreal.
Rouses Point, population 2,000, doubles as a port of entry, U.S. Customs and Immigration Office. The Champlain Division begins here on the international border. Its southern end, technically speaking, is Lake Station north of Whitehall.
Rouses Point as a rail town was quite a place at one time because of the shop facilities, turntable, car department, and so on, and the interchange between several different railroads. There was the Rutland, the D&H, Napierville Junction, Canadian National, Grand Trunk, Central Vermont. Also, years ago, the old QM&S, Quebec, Montreal, and Southern, and it was really a very, very busy place.
Delaware and Hudson peaked during the 1920s when its diversified portfolio featured iron mines, apple orchards, lime kilns, hotels, and steamboats. By 1937, D&H was adapting to changing transportation and manufacturing trends, hauling more bridge traffic.
They had the black and yellow when the diesels first came out. The engine was all black. Most of them had a yellow rectangle on the side of the cab with the engine number inside the rectangle, and they had the slanted yellow caution stripes on the ends. They were very, very good performers as engines go. Of course, they were heavy on the RS2s and RS3s.
In the diesel era, they had two Alco locomotives, the 4050 and the 4051, which were apparently bought from Montreal Locomotive Works, so they were legal in Canada.
As the 1960s slipped into the 70s, rail enthusiasts had at least 4 good reasons to love the D&H. Its vintage Alco PAs from the class of 47 were among the most photographed locomotives in North America. Railroad President Carl Bruce Sturzing understood good PR.
They got a steam locomotive from the ex-Reading locomotive, revamped it in the colony shops to look like a D&H locomotive. They had almost 950 people that took the trip up and back, up one day and back the next to Montreal. High iron companies, Reading 484 and one from Steamtowns, the ex-Canadian Pacific 462. They were painted up and lettered like not exact copies, but they sufficed as a D&H steam locomotive, which for the period of time, it was 1973, it was a pretty ambitious endeavor, and it all went off real well.
The turbos, they took over from the Alco PAs. They had double-ended cabs, so they didn't have to be turned. They could be run from either end. You had the cab car, which was a combination cab passenger coach on each end, and then they had several just regular coaches in between, and they obviously could add, because you'd see trains of different lengths, some with more coaches than others. all of a sudden they were the F40 PHs, and the turbos disappeared. Then you had your Genesis. The first were the 700 series P32 ACs that were the dual power. They replaced the FL9s running out of New York City, Penn Station, to Albany, and then they'd stayed on the Adirondack to Montreal. Then the P42s showed up, and they've been running pretty much consistently since.
Classic locomotives aside, D&H's important connections were in trouble. Declining traffic, rising costs, and looming bankruptcy of neighboring railroads cast a dark cloud over the system.
I think they always wanted to stay as independent as they possibly could. And I think part of that was that they didn't want to lose their identity. They felt that they were just a little bit special, and in many ways they were. And they were very good at train handling and on-time delivery and that sort of thing. And I think they figured they might start losing those capabilities if they got homogenized into the bigger system. And I think probably they would have.
Guilford Transportation Industries grabbed the struggling bridge line at a bargain price in 1984, throwing in the towel after 2 intense labor strikes 4 years later.
When Guilford took over, well, it got to be kind of a travesty. They had a lot of gridlock, and things slowed down, and the service actually got worse. And it was kind of a demoralizing effect, I think, on most of the people that worked there.
In response, the federal government ordered the New York, Susquehanna, and Western Railway to operate a subsidized D&H until new buyers could be found.
Well, the Susquehanna, yeah, they were designated operator by the court. They did well with it, actually, and they sent a lot of good power up here and stuff, and they kept the freight moving and kept the connections happy, that kind of thing.
Dust finally settled when D&H was acquired by Canadian Pacific during 1991.
CP did increase the volume of business quite a lot, and they were heavily into intermodal traffic, and that did make quite a difference. I think that perhaps so-called local customers suffered because CP wasn't really that interested in the little online businesses and the feed stores and the feed mills and all that kind of thing, but they did like to haul that overhead traffic from Montreal south.
CP's Power Potpourri featured an eclectic mix of Montreal Locomotive Works Alco-designed units and EMDs from CP, Soo Line, and several leasing companies.
I like the ones that smoked and had the Alco sound. They were really neat. You'd see some of the RS-18s that doing switching that were pretty good with that. If you heard a freight coming, you could tell if there was an Alco in it just because of the Alco sound.
Despite their railfan appeal, most crews preferred the hand-me-down SD40-2s, SD60s, and other EMD offerings.
Which actually didn't sound as nice as an Alco, but certainly were good locomotives.
Mainline MLWs rode into the sunset on August 28, 1995, when a Binghamton, Montreal train pulled into St. Luc Yard, never to return. Rugged terrain and a succession of curves follow. A highlight is the Red Rocks area, where tracks cling to a narrow granite shelf, blasted into cliffs above Willsboro Bay. Cuts, fills, and bridges dominate, with a short tunnel thrown in for variety.
Literally, they had to carve and blast the railroad bed out of the cliff sides. That was one of those things up here in northern New York that they were looking at and saying, how are you going to do this? And they did it, basically by money and sheer force of will, as so many other projects got done back then.
The sharpest curve measures 8 degrees. The 660-foot deep Willsboro Tunnel offers a brief respite from shelves blasted into bedrock 95 feet above the water. As you might expect, these curves and tight clearances restrict locomotive sizes.
Whitehall was a division point and a terminal, and they had facilities there that were very similar to Rouses Point in the way of a turntable, sanding facilities, fueling facilities, roundhouse, car department, very large freight house there, passenger station, and in the old days, a very large water tower down there.
They had a big yard there, they had a yard master, and they had a lot of switching from the Rutland and their through trains. And the telegrapher was on duty right around the clock. Dispatchers used to be in Plattsburgh, and they turned them down to Whitehall. They had 3 yard masters. They had 3 or 4 clerks all the time. It was a busy yard.